Well, good evening.
Good evening.
How are y'all? Good? Since there's not a coat rack here, we thought we'd just keep it cool, so you don't have to worry where to put your coats. So I hope everyone's comfortable. It is kind of cool in here. Anyways, before we begin, I want to give a special thanks to two people or groups that really did a lot of work to make this, to sponsor and invite Father John to come speak to us, and that's the diocese, Warren Hoy, who's the deacon, and he's the director of the Office of Life, Justice, and Charity. I can't read my writing. Life, Justice, and Charity here at the diocese, and also the Monterey Methodist for Social Justice. Also, so I want a special thank you to both of you for making this possible. I want to begin by just pausing for a moment and consider the state of the world. Consider what's happening right now on this planet in human civilization. And as we contemplate this, I think it's clear that if we humans don't find a way to relate to each other and to the natural world, that we don't have much of a future. And so what Father John is teaching and writing in this book, I think, is of big importance. And so I'm really appreciative for each one of you for coming out tonight on this cold night and to engage with the subject of nonviolence and peace, and especially the example that Jesus of Nazareth has provided, that Gandhi and so many other people who have put into place nonviolence shows the impact and potential it can have. But anyways, John Deere is, I'm going to do a formal introduction now. Hope that's okay, John. He's an internationally recognized voice and leader for peace and nonviolence. He's a priest, an activist, an author. He served for years as the director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which is the largest interfaith peace organization in the United States. He's authored over 40 books, and he is the founder of the Beatitudes Center for the Nonviolent Jesus. And you can find it easily on your favorite search engine by just searching John Deere Beatitudes Center. There's also flyers on this back table here about the Beatitudes Center, where he sponsors and provides workshops and invites lots of guests who are doing the work of nonviolence in the world in a variety of dimensions. So definitely recommend that. He was also nominated several times for the Nobel Peace Prize, including by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I want to share something that Archbishop Tutu said about Father John. He said, "John Deere is the embodiment of a peacemaker. He is led by example through his actions and his writings and in numerous sermons, speeches, and demonstrations. He believes that peace is not something static, but rather to make peace is to be engaged, mind, body, and spirit. His teaching is to love yourself, love your neighbor, your enemy, and to love the world, and to understand the profound responsibility in doing all of this." Archbishop Tutu continued, "For evil to prevail requires only that good people sit on the sidelines and do nothing. John Deere is compelling all of us to stand up and take responsibility for the suffering of humanity, so often caused through selfishness and And I'll say I've been personally touched by Father John's work, both as a young activist and as someone who really I was raised in the Christian tradition, and I really found my way back to embracing this tradition through many activists who were taking a stand for justice and nonviolence and trying to create a nonviolent world. And I also learned that Father John was at Ground Zero after September 11th and served as the Red Cross coordinator of chaplains. I myself, my name is Andrew Bear. I'm a healthcare chaplain. I don't think I mentioned that. And as a healthcare chaplain, and I'm also a volunteer chaplain with the Red Cross in this area. And learning that he was the coordinator of chaplains to respond to families and frontline workers at Ground Zero after 9/11. I really appreciate that work. So I just want to say, after this event, you'll have the opportunity, or during this event, you'll have the opportunity to purchase Father John's new book, The Gospel of Peace, and have your book signed. The book normally retails for $34. We're asking for $25 tonight. And consider purchasing a bunch of copies. I was going to say you could buy one if you're a member of a faith community. You can buy one for the leader of your faith community. There's many of us here tonight who are leaders of faith communities, but also for family, friends, anyone else you'd like to share this message of peace with. And also, I want to let you know that Father John is beginning a 5-month, 50-city, it might be more than 50 at this time, a city tour to promote this new book of his, which is it's an important book. And tonight is the first stop. So Monterey, we're here, is the first stop on his tour. So it's extra special, at least to me, to try to help initiate this tour in a good way. And one more thing, I don't know if you'll want me to say this, but
You're going to say it anyway.
50 cities over 5 months. He's driving across the country for the next 5 months, and he's not really asking for anything, and I know there's going to be lots of expenses for accommodations and food and things along the way. So I also want to just put it out there, we will take an offering after the event, and anyone who feels like helping to support Father John's message, who wants to make a donation to him, I encourage you to consider making a generous offering. So that's enough. Let's invite Father John to
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Andrew, for welcoming me. And Andrew emailed me and said, come to Monterey and talk about your book, so I'm really happy to be here. How about a round of applause for him? I really want to thank Deacon Warren, wherever you are, there you are, for helping to organize and welcoming us here. And I hear there's various Methodists here, too. Thank you for bravely coming to Catholic ground. We'll try to be nonviolent. No guarantee. Well, it's a blessing to be here. Yeah, I think it's now at 65 cities, and I'm traveling till May 22nd. So it's nice knowing it. How am I not going to get COVID? I don't know. But, well, you know, the world's going to hell, and Jesus is so fabulous. We have this great teachings of peace and nonviolence. I thought, oh, what the heck? Hit the road. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the book, and therefore go a little bit about nonviolence and Jesus and the 3 Gospels, and then we'll have questions and comments. But somebody asked me to say a little bit about my life and story with Daniel Baird and all. So I'll say a little bit about that and then get into the book. I also brought some of my other books over there. They're in our friend's hat. What's your name? Steve. Steve's hat. So those,
That's where the money goes.
that's the money for those books go there, and someone's selling the big book over there, that's
Yeah.
separately. So I hope that's good and confusing for you. Yeah, I'll be 65 this summer, and I grew up in D.C., and my life changed. And my father was the head of the National Press Club. And the day Martin Luther King died, we were out that night for dinner. The next morning, my mother woke me up at 5 o'clock and said, they killed Martin Luther King, you have to get up there. She didn't wake anybody else up in the family, and I watched TV. My dad took me down to see the curfew and the riots, and the whole city was under lockdown. And then took me to Resurrection City. And when Bobby Kennedy was killed, I just wept for days. I was 8 years old and went into an existential crisis for 10 years. It was very weird. And I went to Duke University, I think a good Methodist school, again, away from the Catholics. And then decided in the wild fraternity not to be a Catholic anymore. And I figured if you're just going to go for it, not believe in God, make as much money. I was going to try to be a rock star. So anyway, long story short, one day I came to my senses, I saw the light, and I realized, of course I believe in God. Well, then I have to give my whole life to God. I want to give my whole life to Jesus. My next thought was, oh my God, I'm going to have to become a Jesuit. And I entered the Jesuits. My mother was so appalled, she begged me not to. I waited for a year. I went back to my parents. I'm telling you more than I planned already, but I thought, well, what am I going to do if I'm just going to hang out for a year? Andrew, this is what happened to me. Well, I should go and see, if I'm going to give my life to this guy, I should go and see where he lived. So I went, Mom, Dad, I'm going to go hitchhiking through Israel for 3 months to see where Jesus lived. And my mother went like this, it's worse than we thought. And the week I left, Israel invaded Lebanon. You remember the Summer War in 1982? We killed 60, it was the U.S. organized it. It was called Operation Peace for Galilee. We killed 60,000 people in 3 months. And I flew in a practically empty plane with a little backpack and Bible. Did. And walked to Israel. My goal to be at the Sea of Galilee. Have you ever been there before? And back then, it's now all McDonald's. But then it was not only empty, there was nothing there. Because it was still pristine. And I slept by the sea, illegally. Camped out, because I didn't realize there was a war going on. I was a dopey kid. And I got to the chapel of the Beatitudes, and I'm reading the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Love your enemies. I'm looking out over the Sea of Galilee and going, you mean we're supposed to really do this? Isn't it the job of the Methodist minister or the Pope or somebody? Like I have to do this? And just then I saw all these huge Israeli jets fell from the sky, breaking the sound barrier. Boom, boom, boom. Swooped down over the Sea of Galilee, swooped over my head, and dropped a whole bunch of bombs, killing people 15 miles away on the border of Lebanon. And I said, right, okay. I will do this. I will spend my life teaching the Beatitudes and serving them out, trying to be a peacemaker. And I think what happened was, for a second, as I opened my eyes, the war had been going on the whole time. The jets have been bombing it every hour. Who cares? I don't care. Now I'm trying to care. You know, the reality of the world. Sisters and brothers, killing sisters and brothers in the name of Jesus at the place where he said, blessed are the peacemakers, let the enemies. And then, like 2 weeks later, I'm in the Jesuits and I'm meeting Daniel Berrigan. Do you know the Berrigans were the thing? Warren, do you know they were the famous anti-war priests? But if you're going to be a friend of the Berrigans, as they became my best friends, you have to go and get arrested. It's a requirement of friendship. They were like, go get arrested, get at the Pentagon and report back to us. So I did. And now I've been arrested about 85 times, and I'm an ex-con, and I can't vote, and I have a serious problem with recidivism. I'm trying to make her laugh, and it's not working. But this is to answer Steve's question. I was 21 years old. I I'm with the great Jesuit Daniel Berger, who was very sweet and friendly, actually. Like Martin Luther King was this sweet, gentle, nice guy. And I wanted to ask him the meaning of life, but I didn't know how, because I was nervous, because he's kind of scary, because he should have spent his whole life in prison. And he's world famous, and I figure he's going to tell me to go work to end all the wars. And I said, I was getting up the courage, and I finally said, Dan, Father Dan, what's the point of all this again? And without missing a beat, Daniel Bergen said to me when I was 21, all you have to do, John, is make your life story fit into Jesus' life story. I got the meaning of life. I thought he was going to say, end all nuclear weapons. Later, I realized that would be easier than what he told me to do. And that's partly how I ended up talking about Jesus so passionately all my life, and in light of nonviolence. And I started to call Jesus the nonviolent Jesus. You know, later I lived in El Salvador with the Jesuits who were later murdered. They were my friends. I was at the GTU. We'd have been arrested with Andrew many times back in the day. Was the head of FOR. Was supposed to be having breakfast in the World Trade Towers with my parents. We had reservations, September 11th. My mother canceled them 2 days before because she didn't want me to take the subway all that far down from the community where Dan and I lived. So we were having breakfast somewhere else. I went down to help Andrew, and by chance, I met the head of the Red Cross, not Mrs. what's her name, but the head of the chaplains. And I was dressed as a priest, and she said, I need you to run everything. Okay? And she didn't know that I was an ex-con and not very liked among a lot of people because I'm against war. And I had 600 chaplains working 24/7, dealing directly with 50,000 direct family members. I myself counseled 1,500 people one-on-one, as well as coordinating the whole darn thing. And 2 days a week I worked at Ground Zero with hundreds and hundreds of fighters. And it was so traumatic, I moved to New Mexico. I started a campaign to close Los Alamos. And I was just leaving the Jesuits and Rich Garcia, your bishop here, invited me to move to Monterey and become a priest here. And I moved here in 2018, and he promptly died 2 weeks later. And then
Thanks for that.
And then the pandemic hit. What are you going to do? I started writing my book, because that's what I do. And I've written about 40 books. So my whole thing is based on, and I invite you to consider this, what Mahatma Gandhi said. Jesus is the greatest person of nonviolence in history. The only people who don't know that Jesus is nonviolent are Christians. Is he right? If Jesus is the greatest person of nonviolence, and we claim to be followers of Jesus, Gandhi's a Hindu, but we claim to be Christians, we have to be totally nonviolent against every war, every form of violence from, you name it, poverty, racism, guns, sexism, executions, torture, nuclear weapons, bombings of any kind, the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, all the wars in Africa. There's 110 armed conflicts going on right now, much less corporate greed and the fossil fuel industry bringing on catastrophic climate change. And so I've been talking about this and writing about it all my life, and I thought when the pandemic hit that I would write a commentary. Like you used to have in the old days. There hadn't been a commentary in decades, and they have a lot of publisher friends, and I was going to do Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. I wanted a 4-volume box set. What's not to like? You can't get it. And the publisher said, we're doing one book, and you're not doing John because I'm not making a 1,000-page book. So you only got the synoptics here. The Gospel of Peace, a commentary on Matthew, Mark, and Luke from the perspective of nonviolence. That's the big $10 word, hermeneutic. The hermeneutic is like putting on your glasses. What would Gandhi see through his lens? What did our friend Martin Luther King see through his lens? Total nonviolence. That you and I are supposed to be nonviolent. That we're created to live in this beautiful creation of nonviolence. That we're to be nonviolent within. And even the scriptures are nonviolent. When you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke as if you were Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King, finally the gospel makes sense. In my opinion. And that's what I've gone through every sentence of the three Gospels saying, Jesus is more nonviolent than Gandhi and Dr. King and Dorothy Day and Thich Nhat Hanh and the Berrigans and all our heroes. Way more nonviolent than St. Francis combined. Isn't that great? And, it's going to bomb. People don't really want to hear about Jesus, much less nonviolence, much less the nonviolent Jesus. So thanks for coming out on a cold night and sitting in a cold room. But you're in Catholic premises, so there's going to be no coffee, no whiskey, no wine, no food, nothing. It's going to be rough, friends. So I'm trying to cheer you up, and it's not working. I think nonviolence is our only hope. When I did a book, a gathering of Gandhi's essential writings, and I read the 100 collected works of volumes of Gandhi's writings and about 50 biographies. It's a little over the top. I found this sentence. Nonviolence is the highest form of human consciousness. So he's talking about, it's the worst word in the world. But I don't talk about love anymore. Everybody's for love. I love my car. Definitely don't talk about peace. Everybody's for peace. Hitler was for 1,000 years for peace. George W. Bush, Trump are all for peace. Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize and gave the greatest speech on behalf of war ever said. What did when I had our vigils at Los Alamos where they built every nuclear weapon, I spoke to the high school there once, and they said, our parents say we're the greatest people for peace on the planet. You're preparing to destroy the planet, friends. That's not peace. But nobody uses this word except for Gandhi or Dr. King, nonviolence. I invite you to use it. Preach on it. It just confuses everybody. And what does it mean? Basically, first of all, do no harm in thought, word, or deed. How's that going for you? No harm. It's active love, pursuing the vision of our common unity. We're all one. We're all sisters and brothers. You go deep into the truth of human reality, you realize we're one with the creatures and Mother Earth. Not only could you no harm, you never hurt, never kill anybody, or be part of war or any systemic violence. In fact, you give your lives like Jesus and Gandhi, trying to stop the kingdom. So it's engaged, active love, pursuing the truth of our common unity, persistently reconciling with every human being, standing up and publicly resisting the structures of violence, allowing the God of peace to disarm our hearts of the violence in us, that we might be instruments of her divine, disarming love, practicing unconditional, non-retaliatory, sacrificial, all-inclusive, universal love. You're looking at me like the guy's got to cut back on the coffee. But there's one catch. And this is the bottom line of Gandhi and Dr. King and Jesus, which none of us like. There is no cause, however noble, no matter what anyone says, for which you and I will ever again support the taking of a single human life. We do not support killing. We don't support the killing of people who kill people to show that you shouldn't kill people. We work to stop the killing. That's the point of the church. We give our lives. We would rather accept suffering than inflict suffering. We would rather die than kill. Because we follow the person who carried the cross. And that's what Gandhi and Dr. King talked about morning, noon, and night. So I was trying to write about Jesus in light of that. So, shall I say a few words about Matthew, Mark, and Luke? Would that be okay? And then we can, I'll try to be as non-violent as I can, but I'm joking way too much. And this is kind of new for me, though I've been reading the Gospels every day of my life, like maybe all of you. And I'm trying to figure out, how do we become non-violent? What does that mean? This culture where we're so much violence, so much hatred, that hatred toward the self, toward our families are deteriorating, the church is collapsing, the country is collapsing, the world's collapsing, we're on the brink of destruction, as Gandhi said. Okay, the Gospel of Matthew is written for the Jewish community. So Jesus is the new Moses, the new law, the new commandments, the Sermon on the Mount. Great. Gandhi read from the Sermon on the Mount every morning and every evening for the last 45 years of his life. I heard some of you were holy ministers. Do you do that? Can you imagine? I actually went with Gandhi's grandson for a month to India, to all the places where Gandhi lived. He was raised by Gandhi, Karen Gandhi. He went to where Gandhi prayed. He read from Matthew 5, offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. Gandhi's saying that Matthew 5, 6, and 7 are the greatest teachings of nonviolence in the history of the world, in all of human writing. No one ever said this before, and no one has ever come close since then. And he's saying, this is the catechism. I want to be a nonviolent person. I have to read this every day. In effect, it's a handbook on how to be a human being. Isn't that fantastic? And so I've been starting to do that for the last 25 years and giving retreats and talks on the Sermon on the Mount, and I wrote a book on the Beatitudes. Now I run the Beatitudes Center for the Nonviolent Jesus, which you might like, but I'm telling you this to impress upon you how important Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is. And then Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all come after that. That's the way the early church set this up. It's quite brilliant and helpful. The Beatitudes, leading up to the climax. Blessed are the peacemakers. They shall be called the sons and daughters of the God of peace. We could spend, I hope we will spend the rest of our lives pondering that sentence. How are you a peacemaker? Why do I have to be a peacemaker, God? Oh, because we are the beloved sons and daughters of God. And God is a peacemaker, and we're just chips off the old block. So we go into the world of war to make peace and say, no more war. It's not brain surgery, but stand up and do it. They don't want to give you the Nobel Peace Prize, let me tell you. People get mad. And it's so exciting. And as he says, blessed are those who struggle for justice, persecuted in my name, rejoice and be glad. Now you're like the prophets of old. Now you get to be like Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Dr. So then you have the 6 antitheses. This is the key to the 4 Gospels. You have heard it said in the Torah, thou shalt not kill. But I say to you, I hope you're sitting down, don't even get angry. The days of anger are over. You know, I really got to know all these great peacemakers because I've been so outrageous for all my life. And Thich Nhat Hanh, Archbishop Tutu, Daniel Berrigan, Coretta Scott King, Mother Teresa, all these great people were way beyond anger. They left that 40 years ago. Tutu was under death threats his whole life, and nobody laughed as much as he did. I used to tell him, you shouldn't be allowed out in public. You're just embarrassing. He said the same about me, though. Joy and grief. And the commandment there is be reconciled. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I say to you. This is it, friends. If you don't remember anything I say to you tonight, memorize this, because this is the actual Greek. Offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. Gandhi read that sentence every single day and was trying to figure it out. And he kind of invented modern nonviolence. And he got that because Tolstoy. Tolstoy spent the last 25 years of his life writing about that one verse. Did you all know that? And he totally failed And the year before he died, he gets this letter from this guy in South Africa saying, I've dedicated my life to your work. Mohandas Gandhi. And he went to his death knowing that it paid off. It's an incredible story. So Jesus teaches us how to do it. He's saying, no violence. You don't use the means of an opponent if someone's threatening you. You don't run away. You stand your ground and you engage them and try to disarm them through love and truth. And you would willingly accept suffering if necessary until the scales fall from his eyes and you embrace his brothers and sisters. And you apply that Gandhi show to India, to Israel and Palestine, to Russia and Ukraine and the United States. It's the only hope of the world. That's not the climax. You have heard it said, love your countrymen, patriarchal country, and hate your enemies. I say, love your enemies, then pray for those who persecute you. Then you're really sons and daughters of the God who lets the sun rise on the good and the bad, and the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Friends, no one had ever said that before in history. We know that. No one said, love your enemies. And by the way, the enemies are, it's just nation-state language. The people being targeted by your country. So that means Vietnam, Central America, Iraq, Afghanistan, now the whole world with our nuclear weapons. And we sell weapons to both sides in every war in the world, as you know. So agape your enemies, actively love them. And I used to think as a kid, why? And Martin Luther King has a great sermon, and only Dr. King really helped me. And he said, it's right there. We already agreed in the Beatitudes. You're the sons and daughters of God. God practices universal love, so you do. I think this is the most political sentence in the entire Bible. Love your enemies. And I think Jesus, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to, so don't get me in trouble with you. He's not very pious. He never really talks that much about God. This is like the end of, forget war, this is the end of the nation-state system. You see? But here, in the most political sentence of the Bible, he gives the clearest explanation of the mystery of the divine. God practices universal nonviolent love. The sun rising on the good and the bad, the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. You are children of this God, go and do likewise. Isn't that fantastic? And do you believe it? Is your God nonviolent? Do you want a God that lavish with love? I do. Do you want to know that's what we're really talking about here. In all our work for peace and justice, everything comes down to who is our God? We've rejected all of that. We believe in this country and around the world in anti-gospel, war, anti-beatitudes, blessed are the war makers, an anti-Sermon on the Mount, offer violent resistance to one who does evil. No. Kill your enemies. Bomb them. Nuke them. That's where we are. So once you get into that, all of Matthew has to be read through the lens of the Sermon on the Mount. And as I've gone through this, and I wrote this through the pandemic, 500 pages. This is the edited version, if that's any consolation. It all makes sense. Everything he did. In the chapters that follow, he's basically saying, none of this is going to go over well. Because we live in a world of an empire and permanent warfare. And if you stand up as a person of total nonviolence like me, Jesus saying, a person of infinite compassion, universal love, in a world of infinite violence, retaliation, the insanity of war and empire, you're going to be persecuted. People are going to reject you. They're going to hate you. They're going to mock you. They're going to make fun of you. Your family will have nothing to do with you. You're going to lose your job. And some of you will get arrested and be jailed. And some of you will be killed. And keep doing it. Then you get to be nonviolent. What's not to like? Yeah, I'll get with the car. Okay. So, if you really study Matthew, one of the big critiques is he seems to be yelling and screaming at the Pharisees, right? You brood of vipers. Not at all, friends. That's not Jesus at all. We've been sold a whole lie. Everything about Jesus we've been taught is wrong. He's more gentle than Technon and Steve and everybody. I think, he says, for I am meek and humble of heart. Meek in Matthew is the biblical word for nonviolence. Gentle, nonviolent, humble of heart. And I think he was so gentle and nonviolent that he would be like this. And you'd be going, what? Did you hear what I said?
Nope.
No. You're like a brood of vipers. You don't want to be like a brood of vipers. He's not screaming and yelling at all. He's grieving, friends. All four Gospels, Jesus is permanently grieving and lamenting the world and pleading in every form of nonviolent communication. So he does civil disobedience in the temple, and they arrest him and torture and kill him. And God, he doesn't hit anybody, hurt anybody, kill anybody, but he's not passive. He's daring, bold in his nonviolent civil disobedience. He's in the upper room, and we'll go through all the details in the book. He says, my body broken for you, my blood shed for you. What would he, if he were a good Roman or a good American, what should he have said? Go break their bodies for me. Go shed their blood for me. That's the point. No, my body broken for you, my blood shed for you. Do this. Every time you're in communion, you're entering into the methodology of gospel nonviolence. This is the whole point. You don't like that? He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. Here come the horrible soldiers, and Matthew gets into it in detail. Peter, what does he do? He's going, oh my God, they're going to get our God. I got to protect him. If there's ever a just war in all of human history, I'm trying to impress you here, it's not working. If violence was ever divinely sanctioned, this is it. We have to kill to protect our guy, the Holy One. And he's right. So he takes the sword and he goes to kill the people who are going to arrest our guy. And as he does, the commandment comes down. Put down the sword. And those are the last words of Jesus to the church. It's the last thing his friends, the men and women around him, heard him say before he died. And it's the first time they understood him rightly. Oh my God, this nut, this hippie, is so serious about all this peace, love, and compassion, and nonviolent stuff. He's not going to defend himself with violence, which means we don't get to defend ourselves with violence, which means we're out of here. And they all left him. And he went, you should read Gandhi. Gandhi's the greatest Christian theologian. Gandhi says Jesus goes deeper into nonviolence. That's possible. So later, Luke will have Jesus forgiving even as he's being killed. But what's so cool about Matthew, and then just to end on Matthew, is that Matthew makes a big stink about, Jesus rises from the dead, but there's all this long stuff about the Roman soldiers, and they go to get Pilate, and the community's going to steal the body, because maybe he's going to rise from the dead. So they get the centurion, and they get the soldiers, and they go to the tomb after they've killed him, and they put the seal on the tomb. And the seal says, we killed you. You're dead. Now stay dead. And he breaks the law. Resurrection is illegal. It's nonviolent civil disobedience. No. And our guy is still out and about, roaming around, causing trouble, and forming an illegal underground grassroots movement, according to Matthew. You don't like that? Go to Mark. Mark has no Sermon on the Mount, no new commandments, no Moses. Mark is written to a Greek audience. The word immediately is used 41 times. It's totally in the historical present tense, so I decided it's an action thriller movie. It's like the born identity of nonviolence. I'm not kidding you. It is non-stop, in-your-face, nonviolent resistance to empire, and they're all trying to catch up with them, and they finally get them and kill them. It's a thriller. And it's so darn exciting if you see it that way, as really very exciting nonviolence. The first sentence, if you read it and go, oh, that's nice, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus. No! It's totally political, in your face. No one had ever used the word gospel before. You know where that word is from? When the Roman troops rolled into the next country, killed everybody, stole all their stuff, raped the women, burned the houses, killed the children, forced the men to come with them. Then they got the flag of Caesar and went on to the next territory. And ahead, they had a big banner, and they said, "Good news! We're announcing the gospel of Caesar. We just stole and killed all those people in Iraq for Caesar." And everybody had to go, "Oh, good." Mark comes along and says, the gospel of Jesus. Do you see how in your face that is? Our guy is greater than the emperor, who's supposed to be God. Oh, it's really rich. You know, there's no resurrection in Mark. Jesus doesn't appear there. So it just appears, the women meet the angel, and they're terrified. The women are so great. They're the only faithful ones in the gospel. And the angel, I always imagine them smoking cigarettes, say, "Well, go off to Galilee and you'll meet him there." But it all, in other words, friends, you, dear reader, go back to the start of the story, and you join in his movement, and you'll meet the risen one along the way when you follow. So then we get to Luke, because I know I've gone 30 minutes. I would talk for about 4 hours, but I think Andrew's going to get the hook out. Luke is all about grassroots movement organizing. That's why I always say, Jesus thinks he's Gandhi. He thinks he's Martin Luther King. Who do you think you are? I thought that was pretty funny. So, you know, in the book I say, who's Jesus' teacher? Luke clearly presents his mother. We have the 3 movements of nonviolence. The Annunciation is contemplative nonviolence. She's praying, "Oh, your will be done." Once you engage and meet God in contemplative nonviolence, that leads to the second movement, the visitation. You reach out to someone in need. You love your neighbor. And once you do that, that leads to the struggle of justice and love for the poor. The third movement, the Magnificat, that's prophetic nonviolence. You stand up and speak out and throw down the rulers from their thrones, and lift up the lowly and the poor. It's fantastic. You get Luke 4, where Jesus stands up in the synagogue and reads from Isaiah, and he announces the Jubilee year, which is so political. It's the redistribution of all wealth on the entire planet. It's so far beyond capitalism, communism, socialism, we can't even imagine that today. And they try to kill him, throw him off the cliff. That's his first speech, the poor guy. He was so brave. And that's he said, in effect, today, in my words, the revolution, the never-ending, permanent, global revolution of nonviolence begins. And here we are tonight. How are you going to react to these words? This is what I've been struggling with my whole life, and why I feel so passionate about it, and why I wrote all this. But you know, I could go on and on, but I want to tell you, maybe I'll end with this. To me, the most important thing of the Synoptics, just bear with me. I never heard anybody talk about this, but I've been talking about it for 20 years now. This Luke 10. You know, he teaches a shorter, tougher Sermon on the Mount than Luke. Blessed are the poor, yeah. Blessed are those weak, yeah. Blessed are those hungry. Woe to the rich. You know, it's love your enemies is repeated. I say you love your enemies Did you hear what I said? Love your enemies. Be as compassionate as God. God, the definition of God is infinite compassion. That is the divine. We have this mysterious thing. Chapter 9, verse 51. He turned and set his face to Jerusalem. So he's going to go on a march from Galilee to Jerusalem, like Gandhi and the Salt March, like Dr. King from Selma to Montgomery, okay? We understand that. And it says he sent 72 trained disciples ahead of them in pairs. It's classic movement organizing. The only way to change the world is to bottom-up, people-power grassroots movements. From Jesus to Gandhi and Dr. King and the thousands of movements now. That's why all of us who dare claim to be followers of him have to get involved in the grassroots movements like you've been doing. That's discipleship these days in this terrible world. So, but it's so spectacular about nonviolence. I am sending you like lambs into the midst of wolves. When you enter a house, say peace be with you. Let them say peace be with you too. If they give you food, eat the food. And say peace be with you. And then heal them, expel the demons of war, and tell them the reign of God's peace is here. We get to live in God's universal love and peace now. And so, it's a mission, and I love it. But what gets me so incredibly is they come back, and it says, hey, this works. I always think of the disciples as like the Keystone Cops. Or Peter, James, and John. Maybe you better turn off the film here. They're like Three Stooges, or the Marx Brothers, and Martha and Mary. I'm sorry, they're like Lucy and Ethel. None of them can't deal with this guy. And they're rejoicing. And it says, he rejoices. And then they rejoice again. The word rejoice is used 5 times. The only time in the 4 Gospels. I have given you power. No harm is going to come to you. Dr. King defined nonviolence as power. I've done all the research on this. It's shocking. We are not powerless. The government wants us to think we're powerless. Jesus has given us power. And we're not going to be hurt if we go be bold. He says, but don't rejoice because this works if you organize, like Dr. King showed us. Rejoice because your name's in heaven. And then it says, he turned and rejoiced. He said, oh God, I praise you for you've, in your gracious will, have revealed this to little ones. Remember all that? I say, friends, let's go and follow Jesus and practice nonviolence and preach peace and call for the end of war and all violence. Even if you don't think it's going to work, let's just do it to make the poor guy happy. Well, I could go on and on, but I better not be a setback. I could tell you a lot about what I learned. And, in Luke especially, so many beautiful parables and teachings, especially about the will of God, the road to Emmaus story, and the ending, you are witnesses. Matthew's ending is go and make disciples of all the nations. And it's a commissioning, You go and be apostles and teachers and prophets of nonviolence to this culture of violence and war, like Gandhi and Dr. King. I think this is the greatest thing we can do with our lives. The day we die, I hope we will all talk about this. That's why I'm going to go around the country and talk like I'm doing. And just ask everyone to start talking. Use the word nonviolence. Talk about the nonviolence of Jesus. Preach it. Let's disarm and transform the church and our country and the world. And announce, as Gandhi said, that the kingdom of God is at hand. That is a whole new world of nonviolence. No more war. No more racism. No more poverty. No more killing, guns, torture, executions. No more nuclear weapons. No more fossil fuels. A new world of justice and peace is at hand. That's all we have to do is be faithful to the mission. Well, thank you for listening. You've been very nonviolent. Thanks. I'm going to speak for 10 minutes, but I got carried away. So this happens, and I happen with my book. Well, does anybody have any comments or questions, or have we resolved everything? Yeah. But speak real loud so everyone can hear you.
I love what you say.
Yes,
Still troubled about Ukraine.
so am I. I'm glad you are, because if you're not troubled about Ukraine,
I would still support politicians who are, now maybe give me a week after this talk and maybe I won't, but I still support the politicians who want to keep supporting their fight.
right. So everybody does that in the whole country, you know? I was giving a talk like this to 500 people at church in Denver during the Iraq War. And this woman stood up and said, I love what you're talking about. This stuff about nonviolence is very interesting. I think it's very intriguing. And peace, personally, I'm a big fan of peace. But Father John, sometimes you just gotta kill somebody. So how seriously do we want to take this guy? I think he forbids killing. Killing is outlawed. But it's more than that. He's saying those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Violence doesn't work. Violence in response to violence always leads to further violence. Actually, war does not work. It never brings peace. It never promotes human solidarity, community, justice, democracy, what? The spiritual life, prayer, godliness. No, it brings death and destruction, and so hurts people that another generation will come to retaliate. So if we haven't seen that from the last century, where 100 million people were killed, and there's no just warfare. Francis has made that very clear. But just alone, it used to be 10% of the victims of war were civilians. Now it's at least 90%. And the drones mainly kill 90% of civilians. That doesn't work either. So, but I'll just say this briefly about Ukraine, and I can talk about Gaza, and I can talk about any of the wars. Don't believe anything you've been told. NATO, under the guise of the United States, has been planning this war for 25 years. And if you don't believe me, this is what Pope Francis said the week the war started, and why he was so ostracized. If you read the Pope, he didn't come out and condemn Putin. It's the same as the Cuban Missile Crisis, with Russia having nukes right in our backyard in Cuba. And this is complicated, and you're looking at me, John, what are you talking about? You'll never find this in the papers. So NATO has been egging on and agitating and going over the border and pushing and saying, and then violating all their own rules about who's going to be a member and so forth, trying to provoke this war because a lot of money can be made in killing children, like trillions of dollars. That's what the last century could do. So people are getting really rich in this war. And just the Ukraine, they got rid of so many nuclear weapons treaties, so many basic anti-war treaties that spent 100 years in the making. They're gone now because of that. Of course, Putin's insane, but so is Zelensky, so is, name anybody, Bush, Trump, Obama, Biden. They're all addicted to violence because war is all we know. It's not going to bring peace. Now you say, John, I don't like that. Well, listen to the people at the bottom, and you find there's a very strong nonviolence movement in Ukraine. Not in the churches, but in the people. And that's what I listened to. I heard the head of it as a young kid. I forget the name of it now, Nonviolent Ukraine, who's on Democracy Now! And what about the thousands of people in Russia who are in prison for refusing to join the military or fleeing the military? You never hear about that. There's millions of people against this war. But the war is sowing the seeds. Dick Cheney said 20 years ago, the whole point is a series, as Pope Francis said, Third World War by piecemeal. That's happening now. Now we have the Gaza war has long been planned. But when nobody's talking about millions killed in Africa, and those wars there in Sudan that have been going on, they're going on tonight. It's incredible. We have 800 military bases around the planet. This is so far beyond the Roman Empire. It's the whole system. So what Cheney said, which haunts me, You know, they love fossil fuels and catastrophic climate change. They want the destruction of the planet. These small minority 1%. The Great War with China to come. He traveled through, I was in Australia for months on a speaking tour, and Cheney came for 2 weeks. He spoke in 15 nations, and that was his message. You people in Asia need to side with us because we're getting ready for the Great War in China. And I came home and no one knew about this. And that's what, this has all been planned. Our whole economy now is based on oil and war. If, however, you still don't buy any what I would try to make reasonable arguments, then none of this is going to work. That this war with Russia's war on Ukraine, Ukraine's violent resistance as opposed to a total non-violent resistance, like Denmark, Bulgaria, and Norway did with the Nazis, and the organized nonviolent resistance, could lead to nuclear war. Even if you don't like that, which nobody would believe me.
Right.
We still got this guy, Jesus. You want to follow him or not? I'm saying war is such a failure. Let's throw in our chips with Jesus, who said, love your enemies, no violent resistance. Let's figure out a way. One of the life-changing things that's happened 10 years ago is this prestigious sociologist, social scientist at Harvard, raised millions, hired all these social scientists, and studied every single war and violent conflict in the world from 1900 to 2006. Just math, which I can't even comprehend, for years, and has proved mathematically, scientifically, that where nonviolence is used, wars end quicker, democracies and peace come faster and last longer. The more violence used, the worse it gets, and it never kind of ends. That's what Jesus told us. Offer no violent resistance to one does evil. And they killed him. So, and this is what Gandhi and Martin gave their lives for, and all the saints. But I don't want to go to my death siding with the culture of war anymore. I want to finally get with the God of peace. I like the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay. I'm talking about Ukraine. She said in 1920 as she resisted the World War I, this beautiful poem which had this great opening. I shall die, but that is all I shall do for death. That's the Jesus way. Now, the day the war started, what's your name?
Dick.
Huh?
Dick.
Dick. The day Russia invaded Ukraine, I'm sitting in my house. I got all my Bibles and commentaries and writing about Mark 13. That's your homework assignment, Dick, if you get my book. Are you a Christian?
Indeed, yes.
Okay, well then, hey, I didn't make any of this up, dude. I'm sorry. Go home, and I can't find it. The book is too big. Mark chapter 13. He's going to be dead in a few days. It's shocking, and it shocked me. I call it his. I'm trying to impress you. It's not going to work, but here goes. Sermon on eschatological nonviolence in the face of apocalyptic violence. Mark is written around the year 68. We know that. 2 or 3 years before Rome came in and totally destroyed Jerusalem. Now that's a historic fact in the year 70. Why? Because there were all these violent rebel groups, like Hamas, like the FMLN, name it, they were all trying to kill the Romans, Nazis. And Jesus is going through organizing and speaking peace and love and nonviolence, and they're going to kill him. Nobody talks about Mark 13. He's sitting in the Mount of Olives. He's looking at Jerusalem. He'll be dead in 2 or 3 days. And he says this big sermon, which is very weird, but when you read it like Gandhi and Dr. King, you go, oh my God. And remember, I'm telling you, Dick, I write this as I'm hearing the news about the invasion, because this could be the end of the world. Keep watch. He says it 5 times. What I say to you, I say to all, keep watch. Like we're in permanent contemplative nonviolence. We're looking at Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is now the whole world. And he's going like this. Everyone is going to hate you, and everyone is going to want to kill you. So keep watch like me. And then he's dead. What is he talking? The whole gospel he's preaching nonviolence. We are against it. Violence on all sides. We're against the violence of the Russians, the violence of the Ukrainians, the violence of NATO, the violence of the United States, the violence of the Israelis, the violence of Hamas. Shall I continue? Are you getting the point? And everybody's going to be mad at us. And everybody's going to be hating us because we're not going on with the latest war. And persevere to the end, he says. Look at it. It's spectacular. And I remember, I don't know if I wrote about this. Do you remember, Dick, when the 6 Jesuits were killed in 1989 in El Salvador? And we were doing it. So they were my friends. I lived with them in 1985. And, 29 soldiers trained at Georgia, at Fort Benning, woke them up at 1 o'clock, dragged them outside, forced them to lie down, and shot and killed my friends. And not to gross you out, but then they removed their brains. They actually removed their brains and left them next to their body, sending a message to all of Latin America. This is what you get if you think that you can make a difference. It's the same logic of crucifixion. Now, at least I know a lot of people killed. And that's why going to prison is not, or you end up like me, knowing so many people killed. But I remember the first night I got to El Salvador. I was a young whippersnapper, 24 years old. You think I'm striding now. You should have met me then. And they had a dinner party for me. These Jesuits were later killed. And the whole house is covered in bullet holes. And they're like, Andrew, I really just had one question, and I'm still talking after like a half hour. Gosh. And it's 11:30. And he says, yeah, we were, I'm sitting there scared to death. The bombs are falling in the background. He's saying, yeah, tell them the story. Yeah, we were having dinner, and we saw the black sedan come around the corner. So we all just dumped under the table just in time, and they opened fire and strafed, and then drove away, and we went on with our dinner. Boy, were they impressing me, And they go, tell them about the time, and they tell me there was one guy who was 75. To me, he was like 100 at that time. He was an old guy. And they're making fun of this old priest. He didn't. About him, one night the bomb went off outside his window, blew up the window, his bed went flying across the room, and he remained asleep. Doesn't even know how to get up during a proper bombing. This is the way they talked to me. And they said to me, John, now this is the height of the Salvadoran War. They sent me to live and work in a refugee camp, which was being bombed by the United States. And when I had long blonde hair, when the death squads came in, my only job was I was the one to go and talk to them, and maybe they'd kill me. Talk about learning your nonviolence fast, and they probably weren't because I was there. And, I'd go up, and there are all these guys with machine guns. And this is how I was trained by these things. After he said to me, John, we're against the violence of the Allen rebels. We're against the junta and the Salvadoran military. We're against the violence of the death squads. We're against all the violence of the paramilitaries, the sub-death squads and gangs. And we're against the violence, the institutional violence of poverty and hunger that's killing our people. And he said, that's why I never forgot, we are against violence on all sides. And everyone hates us. And everyone wants to kill us. They probably will kill us, and this is what it means to be Christian, John. It's called nonviolent, non-alignment. The reign of God is at hand. Life is short. No more death. No more killing. For any cause. Listen to the voice of the people in Ukraine. If you listen carefully, they're saying, stop the killing. Don't encourage this. Don't send more money for guns. We need food and hospitals and Medicare. I've been in 25 war zones around the world, That's the message I've heard everywhere. Great. Andrew, I'm sorry I go on so long. Does anybody else dare have another question? I'm sorry. Yeah.
What do you think about that Reagan when he said peace through strength?
Well, I don't think he understood anything about peace, and I don't think he understood anything about strength. So peace is strength, but not through violence and militarism and war. It's actually through the nonviolence, the vulnerability of the unarmed Jesus dying on the cross. That's strength and power. It's an explosion of nonviolence that will disarm human beings throughout history, and in the end, when it's all over. That's why Dr. King said nonviolence and true peacemaking is power. That's real strength. So it's everything Orwell told us. War is peace. Peace through strength means nuclear weapons, Star Wars, kill everybody in Central America, Reagan said. They're going to be on our border, the Nicaraguans. We got to kill them. It's all the great lie. If you're planning to blow up the world, friends, a few lies don't matter. Whether it's Ronald Reagan or Ukraine. You see what I mean? So what we want to do is think, well, what did Jesus think about peace or strength? You know, those are powerful words. And it's interesting, he never uses the word strength, except once. So for example, Jesus doesn't say be successful, have good results, be effective. That's the language of war. He says, let your life bear good fruit through peace. So the only time he has a very strange one-sentence parable in Mark. The only way to get a strong man who's taken over your house is that the stronger man comes. So he's saying, I'm a stronger man coming to I'm going to tie up this whole demonic world of empire and bring it down to my nonviolence. What do you think of that? Our God is fantastic. I don't even understand his language, but he's so creative. You see, he's always trying to use different language and imagery to help us. So Ronald Reagan and anybody who's president can only support war and killing because the country is based on war and killing. From the genocide of the indigenous and slavery, through all our wars, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Hiroshima, Vietnam. You know, Trump is the definite, normal, natural outcome of what we've been doing. And that, you know, so what we need are movements. So what the trick for you and I is to be ordinary, nonviolent people, to claim our power and not give up. Keep doing what you can. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things for peace, for justice, for the poor, for creation, every single day, knowing you're not going to live to see anything. We're going to do it anyway. Then you can then end up like Martin Luther King in the balcony. Go ahead, kill him. Kingdom of God is at hand. You will learn the wisdom of nonviolence. So, yeah, all the leaders of this terrible empire we're in are espousing language that is being used to brainwash us to go along with the country, whereas Jesus is announcing a gospel that it's entirely different. Peace through apparent weakness, the weakness of the cross, which is real strength and power. Anybody can kill anybody. Anybody can support war. But to be brave and stand like Gandhi and Dr. King do every day, as towers of peace and nonviolence, and say no, even when everybody wants to go to war. You know, you gotta kill somebody. Hitler, no, you gotta kill Saddam. You gotta kill Osama bin Laden. Now we gotta kill, who are we gonna kill? I don't know. So it's always being told, no. We're gonna side with them on that peace. Andrew, I'm sorry, I just got all riled up. One last question, or do you think we, okay. I'm sorry I talked so much, but I got excited. Thank you. I'll be happy to sign books. Please support my core project of Pray for me as I head across the country and see you. God bless.
Thank you.